and turn it over to Mr. Rob Robinson.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending today. This is our first of our multiple public forums to talk about the Lakeforest future and the master plan effort that the city is endeavoring. I see that we have 3 people on, 3 attendees. So Alexander, Madeline, and Robert, welcome. I think there are a couple additional ones that are signed up to attend, so hopefully they will be joining soon. Basically, the structure for today, we'll begin with a brief presentation, and following that, we will ask you a bunch of questions, just to pick your brain and see where you are sitting with things. As we mentioned on the registration sheet, this is not a debate. We're just out really to listen to you. We're happy to answer any questions that you maybe have that can help you formulate your answers. Being that this is Zoom and the first time we have used Zoom in this, bear with us if you see some slower technical glitches. We wanted to make you aware up front the chat feature will be turned off, but the question and answer feature is turned on. As we go through this, if you use your raise your hand function, that's how we'll be able to call upon you. And with that, Kirk Eby, who is running our tech today, is going to start with a little video to tell you how to do that.
Okay, so here we go.
Good evening. If you've connected to the meeting tonight via Zoom and you're on a desktop or a laptop and you wish to make a public comment, we can't currently see or hear you. What you need to do, please, is wiggle your mouse around and look towards the bottom center of your screen. You should see a raise hand button. Go ahead and click on that now for us, please. Alternatively, if you've connected in via telephone, you can press *9.
So hopefully everybody got that. And we're up to speed on how we're going to participate. So what I'm going to start sharing screen is actually the brief presentation, and then we can kick it off from there. Bear with me 1 second. All righty. So let's see. Come on. So as background, this is the Lakeforest Mall area. It's approximately 100 acres, including the stormwater management ponds that you see here. The really redevelopable area is over 80 acres. This yellow area is the existing transit center, and the blue dots are the entrances and exits from or into the mall. So at a glance, within a half mile of Lakeforest Mall, there's almost 7,000 residential units. These can be in apartments, 2 over 2 condos, townhomes, single family homes. But the important thing is almost 16,000 people live within a half mile of Lakeforest Mall. As for non-residential uses, there's over 1.5 million square feet of general and medical office, almost 1.5 million square feet of existing retail and restaurants, and almost 400,000 square feet of industrial storage and warehouses. So why is that important? Well, part of the reason for the master plan is sort of to be able to address, what's going to happen in the future. And right now, the city is forecast to add, 20,000 new residents to get to almost 90,000 people in the city of Gaithersburg by 2045. To meet this need, though, the city is going to need an additional, almost 7,000 to 9,500 additional housing units to be able to handle these people that are forecast to come. And not only with the population growth, as the old saying goes, with roofs comes jobs, the city is forecast to add approximately 20,000 new jobs, totaling 66,000. The challenge for us is, all of this stuff is going to happen, but how is it going to happen? Where is it going to happen? One thing to note is retail is and will remain oversupplied, as we're seeing. This had started even prior to the pandemic, some of the challenges that we had with retail. So with Lakeforest, it offers a unique opportunity. The areas highlighted in red that you see here are basically the shape of that interior part of the mall that we had talked about. And you can see, and if you've been to our project page, it can facilitate a lot of different types of development, from single family detached neighborhood to extremely dense urban mixed use. This is taken from in Manhattan in New York City. So it can run soup to nuts to suburban models of mixed use, to stuff. This is around in Washington, D.C. So there's a lot of opportunity. So before we get into the questions, I just want to go over briefly what is the purpose of the master plan. So the master plan lays out a vision. What we're hoping to achieve from this effort isn't necessarily a design plan. We're not going to say, and here's where you're going to find X use, and on this block there's going to be this many housing units. What we're really trying to strive for this is to establish a framework for future redevelopment. So we want to express the vision for what we think Lakeforest should be if it's not going to remain a mall, and further, what are appropriate uses or elements to include in a redevelopment plan, and conversely, we also have the opportunity to explain what is not appropriate, what uses don't we want to see within a redeveloped Lakeforest Mall. So that's really what our goal is for this effort. So let's move on to the first question, and I'm going to leave this up here. So with our first question, for the panel, for you guys attending, which of the following do you value most for a Lakeforest redevelopment? Is it increased housing, increased job opportunities, established connectivity with and amenities for the surrounding neighborhood? Or is there some other element that you think personally would be the most important facet to a Lakeforest redevelopment? And with that, based upon the video that we just watched, I'm going to open up the floor. So if you use the raise your hand function, Kirk will be cluing you in. Once you begin speaking, if you could just announce your name, as this is being recorded, so we could have that. So Kirk, if you want to allow the first speaker.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Who is
Okay.
this, please?
My name is Robert Rogers. I live in a condominium in Kentlands. Lived there for almost a year. And so I've created a short, concise summary here. So I checked other. I believe this is Gaithersburg's best chance for a signature legacy project with expanded border to North Frederick Avenue, and which combines items A to C, but most importantly does this as a vibrant mixed-use development. There should be housing for all incomes and family types, incubators for small Black and other minority-owned businesses, combining the best of the Rio, Downtown Crown, and Kentlands. By incorporating the 3 lakes and remnant forest, which are on the edges of the property, into a greenway, trail, and park, with playgrounds and other activity elements for all age groups linked to adjacent neighborhoods, this will become Gaithersburg's unique city center. So I didn't know how much time I'd have, so that's my official statement. But just as another comment, I rode my bike up to the area a couple Sundays ago, and I was amazed at the 3 little lakes that are there. I mean, you call them, we call them detention ponds, stormwater management. But that's what they are also in Kentlands. They're stormwater management facilities, but they're a tremendous amenity in Kentlands. And Kentlands wouldn't be Kentlands without those lakes. And those lakes are owned by the city of Gaithersburg. And I could see this being a very similar kind of thing. It would be just unique. The Rio is another good model, a much higher density kind of thing than Kentlands, which I would certainly support. And there's also a remnant little forest up at the corners of, what's the road? Well, Montgomery Village Way and Lost Knife, is that the road?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a nice little small forest area. It seems like all of that could be part of a wonderful greenway system. So I'll stop talking at this point.
Robert, that was great. If every public forum begins with such thoughtful comments, this will be very exciting. Before I want to expand on some of your thoughts, do any of the other attendees have any thoughts? So Kirk, I see another raised hand. Has Alexander been unmuted?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right, so I guess I will repeat myself. I don't know if everybody heard me. My name is Alex Reutemann, and I live in the Crown community in a townhouse. And generally speaking, jobs are always good. But my question is, in response to your question is, in this new post-COVID world, are we anticipating that these 20,000 jobs that you're implying, are they going to be in a traditional office setting? Or are they going to be like my wife and I working from home? And if that's the case, is the option, B on your question, is that even a viable thing to look into at this point? Thank you.
Alex, that is a great question. And this is what we're grappling with, and part of the reason why we're doing the outreach to the public, because we sort of want to hear from you. It's easy. It's somewhat challenging for me as I sit here in my office at work performing this. But I think that's one of the things we'd like to explore with this group. So if you think, that remote working, as many of the focus groups and other, some of the survey results have said, what are some other employment type opportunities that could come in here? Should it all be retail? Are there industries that even in a post-COVID world, still may lend themselves to a brick and mortar site rather than remote working? So, not to return your question with a question, but to return your question with a question, what do you guys think? This is, sort of what I think is sort of the crux of part of the master plan things. What would be appropriate?
Well, I don't know if I'm educated in this topic enough to answer that, but I'll give my 2 cents, I guess.
That is awesome. That's what we're hoping for. In fact, we're hoping for 5 cents. So go ahead.
All right. So here it goes. I think white collar work, which presumably is the predominant majority of the people living in Gaithersburg, I don't think that's ever going to go to the same level of working in the office as it did before. And already driving around, I see a lot of office buildings looking for tenants. But I think if we can get into healthcare, manufacturing, and things of that nature, I think those jobs, because you're not making vaccines virtually from your home. So I think smarter folks than I would need to look at what jobs are going to remain. And I think those would tend to be ones with some type of advanced manufacture.
I think that's a fantastic comment. So building upon that, and let's see, Kirk, have any of the other panelists, attendees have their hands raised, or can we begin to explore some of the comments raised by Robert and Alec?
No one else has their hands raised. And just so you and Laura know, if you click on the participants button, it'll actually pop up the participants in a separate window so you can look at the attendees as well. It is a little strange when you're sharing your screen that, it's not right there next to the videos. So that's just a technical thing. Again, we're sort of learning this. So
yes, please bear with us. As I said, I can see all the city staff, but I can't see who the panelists are. So going to Alec and Robert's comments, mixed use is great. So I guess one of the questions that we have that we've asked a lot of the other focus groups is, within the city of Gaithersburg, basically since the 80s, and with Robert being a resident of Kentlands, oftentimes traditionally mixed use has been discussed as, retail and housing, but a lot of times apartments. For the attendees, do you see that continuing here, or sort of building off Alec's statement, is it time to sort of begin to think about what sectors or what specific uses comprise mixed use? So, what Alec brought up about, the integrated light manufacturing, vaccine making, all of that. Should a focus of employment opportunities sort of pivot to that with potentially, I'm not saying, no restaurants or no retail, but what do you guys think about what the appropriate mix should be? And I see Robert's raised his hand, so Kirk.
So, of course, I'm not sure. I think Alex raises a great point in terms of the impact of COVID. You know, living in Kentlands, you know, we've already seen, you know, a few businesses go out with the challenges, but we still have a lot of restaurants here that are doing, I don't know how well they're doing, but so anyway, there's life going on here. And actually in Kentlands, as I understand, one of the disappointments in Kentlands was that the commercial area didn't really represent the vision of the original planners, and that may be addressed with a few future projects coming up, a more high density kind of thing. But I think the whole employment thing needs to be addressed in a very comprehensive way. Living in the Colonnade project at Kentlands, the thing I've noticed is the mailroom is now overrun with packages. And even though Amazon's supposed to deliver to our door, I mean, it's awkward in a kind of a closed up, limited access building. And so how do you deal with this reality of running packages here and there and everywhere? I mean, it's just a crazy kind of thing that is now going on with all this delivery services of various types. But I think if there is a creative development that makes places attractive, like Kentlands, like downtown Crown, like Old Town Gaithersburg, but unfortunately, you know, a few businesses have closed there. But I think it merits a lot more discussion about what is the new economics that will develop.
Great points. Building off something you just mentioned. So let's assume we begin to diversify the sectors for the various employment opportunities, you know, and sort of inferring what you're saying, you know, don't put all your eggs in one basket. This all shouldn't be, you know, soft goods as employment opportunities. Do you, the attendees, think that we should strive to have, Alec had mentioned the white collar jobs. Should the emphasis try to be on diversifying in such a way that it also creates a continuum of job opportunities for different levels of education, you know, ability for salary and wage growth, things like that? Or should it all be, you know, sometimes we hear, you know, if you know, everybody just wants 100% retail, well, you know, for the most part, that's, you know, minimum wage jobs. By the flip side, you know, if everybody just wants, you know, high-end office or something like that, you know, that has its own requirements. Do you, the attendees, feel that we should try to explore, I know you had mentioned incubators, the ability to provide at multiple levels of employment? I see Alec has raised his hand.
Yeah, I think this is going to be the most important point in not only the development of Lakeforest, but in Gaithersburg and the DC metropolitan area in general. I think individuals who are highly educated, and we're in an area where a lot of people have bachelor's and higher degrees, especially compared to the rest of the country, they will have jobs. And those jobs, like I said before, will probably be remote for a long time. And I don't think we should worry about those individuals. We're going to be okay. The idea, I think, to focus on, you know, are jobs that, I don't know about retail, because as other individual, sorry, I'm blanking on the name, rightfully said, you know, he sees all of these Amazon packages. We order pretty much everything on Amazon. Even if we could go to the store, it's just so much easier. So fighting that makes no sense. So I would be, and this is a little bit, I mean, counterintuitive, because I love living in Crown because I can go to the grocery store, I can go to Kohl's, I can go to a bunch of places. That's great. But retail is not the future. I think manufacturing or some type of, you know, they're talking about potentially bringing Amazon shipping center to Gaithersburg, right? something that can work with that to provide goods for then Amazon to ship around. I think that should really be the focus. And not only is that going to provide jobs for people who are not necessarily PhDs, but I think it's also going to provide the jobs of the future, because until the robots take over, people are still going to be necessary to put things together. And if we focus on that, I think that's much better than both offices as well. And because God knows we have a lot of office space now, and specifically, you know, working in a grocery store, while that's super, super important and valuable, and we need that, but I don't see how, you know, making $10 an hour, $12 an hour, or even 15 if the minimum wage goes up as it's planned to do, how it's really feasible to live here and live off of that. And so I think people will necessarily move further out to have those jobs. So again, in summary, manufacturing, I think, is the way to go.
That's great. So before we move on, and while I still have you on the line there, Alec, so you brought up a lot of good points. You know, what attracts you to where you chose to live, things like that. So if a focus was on non-retail, non-traditional office jobs, what other ancillary type commercial uses could be here to be attractive? What we've heard from a lot of focus groups, a lot of people have mentioned, to your point, you know, they're not looking for a store when they can order on Amazon, but they are looking for experiential type retail uses, you know, something different that's more interactive and engaging, and sort of what you brought up about the vaccine, something they can't do online. Does the attendees panel feel, you know, that could be a good position for, you know, also incorporating into a redevelopment?
Absolutely. To give a quick plug, in the Crown community, there is a art store, and my wife loves to go there and like put, I don't know, glass and paint it and do all sorts of stuff, like wine and paint nights and all of those types of things. And you know, they've obviously been really hurt by, in the beginning when we had to close down and you couldn't go there. So I'm sure, you know, they've had a real tough last 8 months. But before that, we would walk by it, and we'd go in there and we walk by it on the way to the grocery store. They were always full. So people are still hungry for those types of experiences. But again, my question is how much, what's the word I'm looking for? That's one thing, and there's maybe like 3 jobs, and it's individually owned and things of that nature, but that's not really a big picture solution to, you know, providing tons and tons of jobs and opportunities. So, but those experiences would be great, and those are the types of places that are doing great. Well, were doing great before COVID.
That's fantastic. And again, the reason I bring this up, not that, you know, you know, that we're thinking of 80 acres of hot pots stores. I get you on that. But what we're talking about, you know, to Robert's earlier point, you know, if we want to create essentially a redevelopment that has a unique sense of place, you know, it's the mix of uses that contribute to the vibrancy of a redevelopment. You had brought up something, so I think it's important that when you mentioned, let's go to Robert real fast before I move on.
Yeah, a couple comments. One is my wife and I moved here 2 years ago to this area, and I was an architect in my career in Southwest Virginia, and frankly, I was appalled at the lack of housing choices for people like me and my wife. We're retirees, and you know, coming from a lower cost area to a high cost area, you know, affordability is a big deal. I mean, it was a big deal for us. That's why we moved to Kentlands from over near Rockville, is because this was a semi-affordable area for us. And so I think there's another employment sector. It's called retirees. And that's something that doesn't call for new schools if you're catering to retirees. And this kind of thing. Now, of course, there's that huge Asbury Methodist Village, but I think as people retire, And with the COVID and other things just decimating retirement accounts and other things, I think we've got to be much more creative about the kind of choices for retirees. I would love to live in a 20-story high-rise building in downtown Gaithersburg that looked over a lake. And I mean, there are a lot of people like me that that would love to live in a place that has character, it has opportunities, and then you build on the things that are needed by a retirement community or a building, and other elements. Another quick couple things: manufacturing. I think we could take the lead in green manufacturing, solar panels, wind. All these creative things. There were 2 programs last night on PBS about the global warming and the stretch for trying to figure out how in the heck do you deal with all this stuff. There's going to be huge opportunities, and we're right next door. We're surround the National Institute of Standards and Technology. We ought to be an incubator for them, a model for green building, green everything, and a test place where opportunities could happen. So, one other thing is that, Alex, you mentioned the arts place in Crown. Well, we've been to the art barn in Kentlands on several occasions with our granddaughters, our 3 granddaughters who live in Rockville. And it's a wonderful place. We went to 2 performances. It's just a wonderful small scale example of an little arts center. I would hope something like that could be in downtown Lakeforest to, and then building on other things. One other quick comment about models. There is an little arts place in downtown Rockville. If you think about parallel kind of places, downtown Rockville has done a lot with the reworking their downtown. And the problem I see with that place is that their square, it's surrounded by buildings. It doesn't connect. It doesn't open up. It's just, you're so hunkered in that one place. It doesn't connect to other areas like with a greenway or a trail network or something that kind of opens up and is a creative expression to other areas. Anyway, enough said.
No, very good. And you sort of helped give me a good transition to where I want to go. So we've been talking about the jobs and the type of non-commercial uses. The greenway stuff, is very much in keeping in what we're hearing from other focus groups regarding, what should be incorporated. I think, Robert, you had brought up density. So I'd sort of like to explore with the attendees, what are you envisioning housing-wise? I heard, the word affordable. That's conjures up 2 different things. There's affordable housing, which is, a requirement under the code, but then there's housing affordability, which is a very different thing that, do you present something that affords a diversity of housing types that can appeal or can fill multiple price points? Robert, you had mentioned a 20-story tower, that's dense, that's awesome. Obviously 80 acres can accommodate that, but is that appropriate? So what do you folks sort of feel about, what should sort of be the housing strategy component for a redeveloped Lakeforest Mall?
And just a quick note for the panelists who just joined, if you want to speak, you'll need to use your raise hand function to speak. That's just a quick note.
So Kirk, I see Alec has raised his hand.
And I don't want to hoard up all the time, so if anyone wants to speak, and I'll keep this very short. But to answer that question, and this is something that I've been personally dealing with, because we were all for high density places, and we moved to this area in our late 20s. And again, I bought in Crown because of walkability and all of that. But then we're expecting our first child. And what happened is, I don't know if you've seen that commercial where I think it's one of the insurance companies are like, well, don't be like your parents. And sure enough,
Yeah.
we're becoming our parents, and we're like, well, this townhouse will probably be here for a year, and then we need a bigger space, and we need somewhere for the future kid to run around and play and all of that stuff. So I get completely the idea. We want high density, et cetera, but we also have to remember, and especially for the people buying in this area, and if Lake Forest development is going to be similarly priced to the Crown community or the Kentlands, for example, those people have options in terms of finances. And if it's all going to be high density, it might lose out on a lot of people who we are becoming, because we do unexpectedly expect space and all that comes with. So that's something to think about.
So Alec, building off that, talking about, again, thinking about a bigger picture. And as I mentioned, in one of the earlier slides, there's lots of developments, within a half mile or a mile of Lake Forest, which is, essentially a 20-minute walk. There's lots of single family detached homes, there's townhomes, there's all of that. Could a Lake Forest redevelopment, incorporate some of those, but to your point, maybe focus on the high density, establish the amenities, but then if somebody's ready to go to, a single family detached on a quarter-acre lot, the opportunities that are in the immediate area, is that something feasible? Or should a Lake Forest redevelopment try to be all things to all people at once? I see Robert's raised his hand.
Well, sorry, I guess Alex and I are making the most comments. I think the types of housing is very important. I would hate to see single family homes because that just gobbles up the land. Although you can see, like in Kentlands, you could still do small lots and this kind of thing. But I would hope that townhomes and low scale buildings, a mix of housing types and affordability. One of the most kind of shocking things that I saw after the death of George Floyd and the analysis of the city of Minneapolis was they had a picture of a large structure that had been designed and built for a mixed use development. And it looked interesting architecturally. And then it said over the years, it has evolved to all lower income housing. And it's like, how do you, somehow we've got to get over this idea that the poor are over here and the rich are over here and everybody else is somewhere in the middle, and figure out how we can do these mixed income things and have it be stable and not gentrify or go the other way. And so it's a dilemma. There will always be a need for families, and I'm a strong believer in family support, like Alex was saying. And but people like me and my wife, there are just two of us, so we could easily be in a high-rise building or a low-rise, depending on what it is. But we're not going to spend $600,000 to do that. And so it's like, how do you mix the affordability with everything else? It's a huge challenge.
Robert, you must be psychic because you have offered me an excellent transition to question 2. In what ways can a Lake Forest redevelopment support social equity, diversity, and sustainability efforts? So you were very much on target. The world has changed as we know it. These issues are very much at the forefront across the spectrum on a number of fronts, and as well they should be. So again, sort of opening this up, the social equity, diversity, and sustainability question. So we've sort of touched on, Robert, that you had the opinion that a mixed income housing thing, sort of can promote equity. Anybody else have any ideas? And as Kirk mentioned, welcome to our latest attendees. Like, hopefully you guys will jump in and participate.
And Rob, just a quick question. Since there are so few attendees, should we just allow them all to talk? And then if, of course, it gets out of control, we can always let them not talk. But would that be more efficient, do you think, to just allow them to talk?
If it's a small amount, yes, I'm fine with that.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead
Again,
and
folks,
allow
we
everyone
had
to
put in
talk.
the hand raising thing. If we had, 25 participants, it would get a little chaotic. But seeing we have such a smaller group, we're just going to unmute everyone. So feel free to sort of chime in.
All right, well, since no one else is saying, I guess we'll continue the usual suspects, so to speak.
That's fine. That's fine.
The whole idea of having different types of people living in the same community is very attractive, right? That's awesome. The issue is what are the consequences of that? And I went to school, University of Chicago, right? And this is south side of Chicago. And the area there is very, very gentrified, Hyde Park, whereas the whole area around it is very, very heavily minority and heavily, very close to the level of poverty, right? And they have tried to do a lot of things to solve those issues in Chicago, right? And it all failed. And then I went to law school in Iowa City, in Iowa, and they also tried to correct these things by by building all income level neighborhoods. And then what invariably happened, those communities had flight from them, and they became places of quote unquote no go. So we have to be very, very careful with that consideration. We have to provide opportunities first. So like if we do those manufacturing jobs, if we do things where people with lower income or no income come in and they get jobs, and then they're no longer low income and they're middle income, then that's a wonderful idea. But if we just say, well, we will subsidize and go ahead and come in and then just leave the people to, struggle, then we're not actually doing anything. That's very important. You got to solve the problem instead of just throw money at it and hope magically. We moved to Crown and Robert moved to Kentlands. Neither one of us moved to Montgomery Village. And so we have to be very, very smart about how we do the social diversity and how we do all of these things to make sure we live in a place where people can rise instead of just put them in and leave them to whatever happens to them.
So to paraphrase what I'm sort of hearing based upon your life experience, and as a somebody who grew up in Baltimore City, I can also relate in many ways. Mix of housing in and of itself do not address these issues. It seems that you're saying it's these other things, the variety of job opportunities, or even as something as simple to Robert's point, the variety of no cost amenities, be it parks or communities, or the integration of other social support systems really could make this successful, as opposed to trying to go in and retrofit and just handle it through housing. Is that a safe paraphrase, Alec, to what you were trying to get to?
You said what I was thinking in a much better way, so thank you very much.
Not a problem. So do any of our other guests, now that everybody's unmuted, have any thoughts on this?
Well, I have one other thing. I heard a program the other day that was talking about the efforts of major institutions, urban institutions that were surrounded by lower income areas, and they realized, well, they could make a difference in their surrounding communities. And so this was like a hospital in Cleveland. I don't know if it's a Cleveland Clinic or what, but anyway, they said, well, why would they get their laundry from 10 miles away? Why would they do that? Why would they get some other services, a ways away? Why not work with the community around them to help create economic opportunities that the hospital needed And so it seemed to be a good model for bringing up a community. I don't know if it's possible to place in Chicago, like the University of Chicago, the scale of the area around it, but still they made the role of an institution. I don't know what institutions are right there in Lakeforest that could do that, but it's certainly worth considering.
So Robert, to your point, do you feel a redeveloped Lake Forest Mall should, building on the first question, one of the others, it's imperative that it connect with and integrate with the existing surrounding areas?
Well, yeah. In fact, one of my other thoughts is that the boundary of this ought to extend up to North Frederick Avenue, because you need to link in over across North Frederick to Burlington and to that shopping center over there, and consider the role of those office buildings and things. Those could be institutions that could help provide employment or support for the development of Lake Forest Mall and their own redevelopment.
So anybody that we haven't heard from have any thoughts? All right, if not,
I want to make one other comment. This is
sure,
on
go ahead.
this was just directly in response to this question, question number 2. My response was, most important, have these 3 be the top criteria: that's social equity, diversity, and sustainability, which will determine the development approach and the economic and marketing models to use for the project. Lake Forest should be a model of green building design, a means of community involvement and input. This latter can be messy and controversial, but very, very important. In other words, in my own career as an architect, money, economics was a big deal. And to make projects work, particularly when I did downtown revitalization in a few small towns in Southwest Virginia, the economic model was often more creative than the architecture. It had to be, a combination of grants and private and government and lots of things cobbled together to make these projects work. And so I think establishing these 3 criteria that you have at the top, if economic sustainability were at the top, then everything below it could be compromised. If these are at the top, then the economics could be developed to support those instead of the other way around.
Great. Anybody else?
A question on, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
Where do you see, or where does the city see the funding coming from? Obviously, if we, if the agreement is to build housing, then we know where the money is going to come for that, right? I'll be a developer who would love to build more development. But for any other purpose, where does the city see the funding coming from?
To dodge and weave, the city has taken no position at this point, but I think this is something that, again, can be explored. Some of the focus groups had said, the market will bear what the market can bear, and there's a lot of attractive features to Lake Forest that will encourage investment. But some of the stuff that's being discussed, may be beyond the pale. So does the panel believe that, to make this truly successful, some sort of government investment, be it city, county, state, federal, this is an enterprise zone, this is an opportunity zone, is there a role for government to play in moving this forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it has to be. As I mentioned, to have some projects work, you have to cobble together a bunch of different funding mechanisms to make all of this work. So I think Gaithersburg should be the lead in many respects to help govern the overall nature of the project.
Okay. Anybody else?
It's hard taking on more financial responsibility for a city or even state, Montgomery County, et cetera, during what I can't even imagine the job that not so much the city but the county has to do to balance anything close to, balance budget in what's happening now, right? So I think in general, I would agree that it would be nice to have that to be able to influence what happens. I just don't see how realistic that is. We do have a good credit rating, but do we really want to borrow money? That's my worry.
Well, here's a way to sort of phrase our conundrum. So part of the reason we're approaching the master plan in the direction that we are, that it's more a higher level master plan than a detailed plan, is given all the current uncertainty. But being long range planners and master plans are supposed to last a while, we're taking the hopeful look that eventually we will get beyond COVID. We're afraid, if we feel that this is in perpetuity, then all the efforts are sort of for naught, and we should be batting down the hatches. So I get where you're coming from. So I just want to be upfront, taking the longer term view with the hope that, something will resolve. Again, that can still sort of lay out, the roles of the various stakeholders. If that helps, Alex, sort of explain sort of where our thinking is coming from. So any other thoughts on these topics, friends?
Well, Alex makes a good point in terms of the and you too. I think, and again, hearkening back to my career as an architect, in most places there's a zoning category for planned development of some sort. And so the dilemma is that you have to develop a plan, you have to go through all these hoops and all these requirements to do something that nobody wants to do them. And so you default to the least complicated thing, which was in Southwest Virginia, was your single family subdivision. And so it's like, in other words, just one category, take the regulations that you have and turn it upside down so that you make it easier to develop something that's more complicated and mixed use and the goals that you want to achieve, and make it harder to do the things that you don't want to have happen. That could be challenging, but anyway, I think the regulation aspect is an important part of it.
Robert, I may want you to come to every public forum because you provide me the greatest transitions. So building off what you're saying, let's jump to question 3. What would you consider a successful redevelopment project, and how long would you wait to achieve the success? So building off what Robert just mentioned, how long, if we establish this vision, what is realistic before it's time to reassess, or do the proverbial fish instead of cut bait, waiting for something and take the path of least resistance, just as construct, to help bring to light some stuff. Robert, you come from a community, that, the first sketch plan to come out of the Kentlands Commercial District Master Plan was 10 years later. Alec, for Crown, I was the planner for Crown when it was purchased out of bankruptcy. We're 10 years later, and we still have the school site to be built, and still have a pad site to be built in neighborhood 1, and only neighborhood 3 is now being constructed. And it's 10 years after the original 4 years when it was purchased out of bankruptcy.
Well, I put down first phase and core areas and linkages complete within 5 to 7 years, seeking to retain businesses from the current mall. Final completion 10 to 12 years. I'm 76, and it's like, gee, I'd like to see this project finished in my lifetime, but likely that wouldn't happen. But and so I think the time scale really is going to be dependent on the development model. And when I went through the mall, when I rode my bike up there, it's like, I don't know how many businesses are left in there. What, a third or a quarter of the businesses are still in the mall? And it's like, how can you capture those small businesses and keep them around in a first phase of the project? Or is it just too late? I mean, are they just going to vanish along with Macy's and something else will happen, you know, after the project goes bankrupt or something? Anyway.
Well, what you mentioned is very much in keeping with what we're hearing from a lot of the other focus groups. A lot of the focus groups said, you know, they think it's very important that there be some sort of traction or initiation within 3 to 5 years. Some other focus groups had said, you know, they're willing to wait, you know, don't sell yourself short, you know, stick to your vision. Others focus groups have said, you know, maybe at the 10-year mark, you know, reassess the master plan, see where things stand, and make adjustments from there. So does any of the other panelists, anybody else have any thoughts related to this? You know, if there's this great vision that we come up with that, you know, has developer support and community support, how long should we hold out to try to achieve that vision?
Rome was not built in one day, as long as it takes.
So that's great to say, but how long, you know, how long should the city wait in general, you know, or how long would you be willing to wait to, you know, to bear out no action? So like the first part of the question, you know, is it realistic to expect, if not demand or try to influence, that something occur in the first 3 to 5 years? And this may be, Alec, building upon what you were saying, that there may need to be government investment.
And yeah, that's the ultimate question, because you said something that I fully agree with in most things. The market will bear what the market will bear, right? And if for some reason we're seeing that developers, for whatever the master plan eventually chooses to do, that nothing is being built or made in 3 to 5 years, then I think that's a good sign that something needs to be rehashed in the master plan, because there's a lot of money chasing returns now. Mm-hmm. And if for some reason that money doesn't decide that this is worthwhile, I don't think it makes sense to throw government funds to motivate money to come in. That's one thing. But just to, if we see we can't get any private partnerships and it's all government, that's a very dangerous route to take.
So just to play devil's advocate with this, so it's 5 years in, there's been no traction. When you say reassess the master plan, do you envision reassessing some of the nuanced details, or should the city reconsider its entire vision altogether?
So probably would be the former. So like some of the smaller details. So I have an example of, you know, the Crown community, right? And you're absolutely right. We went to a speaker about the lawyer that was responsible for the sale of the Crown family farm for the redevelopment and how long it took and the process, etc. That being said, you know, it looks like the Crown has been pretty successful. But it's mostly based on, I would consider, the first time I heard how much it costs to buy a townhouse, small townhouse here, I was like flabbergasted, right? Mm-hmm. This is not exactly affordable housing, right, in any sense of the word. But if we start with a process of trying to bring more housing that's going to be for all income levels, and then we're seeing that, well, you know, there's not a lot of private money that's willing to go in and build, you know, $150,000, $200,000, whether they're condos or whatever else you can afford for $200,000 in this area, then maybe we rejig it by telling, well, all right, you can put more $600,000 townhomes or $1.2 million houses in to motivate people, but you will then also have to build some affordable housing. That's what I mostly meant. If we focus on like all these goals that we really want to accomplish, but we're seeing that that's not being attractive enough, I hope the city is flexible enough to say, all right, well, where do we need to budge to allow for development? Because 5 years there should be some level of development started. I'm not saying it should be finished in 5 years, but if there's nothing happening, we got to do something.
Okay, I think that's a great point. So we're coming up on an hour. We had originally booked 2 hours, but that was with the expectation of a much larger panel. That is, essentially my questions.
Well, I have one other comment.
That's what I was going to open it up. I mean, if there's other things you guys wish to discuss, that weren't covered under the questions or what we haven't done in the conversation, now's the time to do it.
All right. I think that the city, all right, here's a model idea. All right, the city says key parts of this are to keep at least the 2 lakes that border Montgomery Village Way, and to make those a park and a feature for the community. And then develop develop the overall master plan and develop a phased piece right next to the lake and try and entice a developer to put a signature building on that property that takes advantage, with shops on the ground floor or whatever. But try and do some kind of signature project with that. One example of a city that is, we used to live in the Triangle area of North Carolina for a few years, and the city of Raleigh was very proactive. It sees itself as a major player in North Carolina, and it's a capital. And anyway, they're taking a very aggressive stand to expand their downtown. They bought a former mental hospital site. It's like 50 acres or something, right smack downtown. And they're making a feature park out of it. And the theory is it would become the Central Park concept of downtown Raleigh. Well, I think there's so much more that could be done with 100 acres, but at least develop the park concept in it and things that might border it that could be initiating projects that would help inspire other groups to come in and play a role and feed into the master plan.
Great. One thing struck me that I want to put out. So with our flow of discussion, a lot of things we've talked about, as I mentioned it during the presentation, there is an existing transit center, which is really more of a bus shelter. But this transit center, serves 7 different ride-on routes that link up county with down county. And the, proposed Maryland 355 BRT is meant to go there. From the panel's perspective, how important is a, more robust transit center in accomplishing these other goals that we've been talking about, be it amenities or job opportunities or housing? How attractive is a maybe, I'm not saying a bus depot, but a more vigorous transit center as opposed to just an open air shelter in this redevelopment?
It would be amazing. One of those things that brought us here was the potential of the rapid transit bus, right? And I would love to be able to take a bus to somewhere. However, and this is the key why it can't just be regular buses. If I'm not winning on time, I'm just gonna drive somewhere. And that's just the moral. Like, I used to take the train into the city because there was traffic. Since the COVID situation, I have never taken public transportation because I can get anywhere in my car much easier and faster. So just having the bus system, I don't think that does anything. If there was a dedicated lane for a bus and I can go to the Central Park idea that I really like, that would make that park very usable. And I would put it ahead of Seneca. I would put it ahead of all the other parks in the region. If you can get there easily, comfortably, you know what the timing is, everything. So that would be amazing. I just don't know. And this, if you can answer this question, or if not, that's totally fine. Where is the rapid transit system, since like the state pretty much said no? Is that even a theory anymore?
So the last we heard about the corridor cities transitways, the state has transitioned it over to become a Montgomery County project. But aside from that, obviously, given the world we're in right now, I don't believe there's been much traction. I think obviously, as you probably followed in the Washington Post, and we're getting a bit off topic, the state and county have been mainly more focused on trying to complete the Purple Line.
Well, I think my 2 cents on transit would be to have the transit there. Certainly make it bigger than what it is now, but don't make a bus kind of concept right in the middle of the project. Keep it kind of toward one side, but make it bigger than what it is now, so that it's a more comfortable place for people to go. And I agree with Alex. Somehow it needs to go someplace easier and faster. One place that we lived was Evanston, Illinois. It's a city just a little bit bigger than Gaithersburg. And we lived in the downtown area for a couple of years, 12-story on the 12th floor, looking over Northwestern University to Lake Michigan. And we were right next to the downtown and 2 different rail lines, the L system and a train system. And everything kind of fell into place. It was a wonderful city to live in. And so the trouble is you don't have the train. The MARC train is in Old Town and over at the other off Clapper Road. And so somehow it seems like there should be some kind of connection over to the MARC train perhaps, and tying into these other things the county might develop.
Great.
Oh, and don't forget bikeways, bike lanes, please, because I love the new bike lane on Quince Orchard, but it's an awful situation from Clapper Diamond up to Frederick. It's you take your life in your hands to go that last half mile. And so you can create the bikeway along Montgomery Village Way, along those 2 lakes, and then tie it in better to the Quince Orchard Trail. And I think at least that would help people like me who love to bike.
Excellent. Any other thoughts from anyone? Anyone on the panel? Anything we haven't discussed? Otherwise, we're going to start ending this a little bit early, because I don't know what else to ask you guys. We've covered a lot of topics.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have I looked through the whole information packet that on Lakeforest.
Thank you. I love that. That's no sorry. That's why we put the stuff up. We were hoping people reviewed the material.
Well, and I have just a couple suggestions. You had things like where should the roads run in the new Lakeforest, and it's like, how can you determine? There were like 5 or 6 ideas, and it's like they were all kind of screwy, and it's like I don't think I even answered it, because it's like, how can you do that without you have the concept in mind first? In other words, the road shouldn't determine the form. And the other thing is, under the green space thing, there's nothing in anything I saw about those lakes, and it's like, why? And there was nothing about a greenway that I found. It's like, why aren't these major things in that data packet?
Well, the road network is, you're an architect, so was trying to get from suburban cul-de-sac models to discussing whether or not, to increase porosity in a grid pattern. There were lots of questions, that we asked, and this is why we're
Right.
receiving feedback on the green and open
Sure.
space strategies. As I said, I'm not going to give answers. we're still in the we want to hear from you phase. My answers will come later.
Well, I want to thank you for all that you've done. This has been a great forum, and so Alex and I, you got a share of ideas.
Thank
you for doing it.
So again, any of the other attendees who have not spoken, anybody wish to give 2 cents? You've heard a lot of different things. And with that deafening silence, I think I have my answer. So how I want to wrap this up. So folks, until noon next Friday, if you haven't taken our survey, please do. Please visit the project page at gaithersburgmd.gov/Lake Forest. I understand, sometimes, even in virtual meetings, you can be a little bit shy or intimidated, or you just want to hear. We're still accepting comments. We have a unique email address, lakeforestmp, all one word, at gaithersburgmd.gov. If you email that, you can email us questions, you can email us comments. It would be great. So next steps, again, all of our engagement efforts basically end November 6th. After that, we're going to be collating all the various comments and surveys and focus groups and everything. And what we're leading to is a joint work session on December 14th with the mayor, city council, and the planning commission. During that work session on December 14th, we will be, presenting all the various findings and discussing, making some recommendations from the staff level of what the direction we think the master plan should go, and receiving, obviously, input and guidance from the council and the planning commission on where they think the master plan should go. Following that work session, we're actually going to begin drafting the master plan. It'll probably take 2 months. So right now, sort of what we're looking for is late February, early March, releasing the master plan, the draft master plan, for the required 60-day comment period. After that, it goes through, a public hearing process. So I want everybody to be aware, while this form of engagement is coming to a close, there are still plenty of opportunities over the next 9 months to stay engaged, have your voice heard, comment on plans, reach out, participate in the joint work sessions, participate in the public hearings, review the draft. The project page will remain up and open with updates as we progress to each successive step. So that's not going away. And again, I appreciate everybody taking the time this morning to participate. So I'll throw it out one more time. Any comments from anyone? Everybody good? And again, I see Alec there popped up on the screen. Any parting words there, my friend?
I just want to say thank you very much for having this. This was great.
I'm glad to hear it. So if that's it for everyone, again, please stay engaged, stay in touch, lakeforestmp at gaithersburgmd.gov. And with that, we're going to go ahead and end this session. Again, thank you, everybody, for participating.